Because he fled in terror at the end of his third Prince of Tennis video, Y Ruler of Time is not able to present the following review at his usual filming location. Fortunately, he was able to film the video at a remote spot where he set up an exact replica of his usual shooting location.
I don't attend church, I've never read the Bible, I'm not a Christian. I consider myself an agnostic, and I'll admit that I'm pretty ignorant of many of the beliefs and practices of quite a few religions, including Christianity. That said, today's manga, which is a seinen comedy called Let's Bible, didn't make any references that I wasn't able to get.
Let's Bible is a two-chapter one-shot that deals with the bizarre imagining of the second coming of Christ, which ends up revolving around a young Croatian fisherman named Vulcan. No, not that Vulcan. No. Wait, what the... No!
Anyway, Let's Bible continues the proud tradition of manga being chock full of references to Christianity, which, frankly, are pretty shallow.
If you look at some popular anime and manga, you'll see a ton of name-only references to Christianity, like the homunculi in Fullmetal Alchemist being named after the Seven Deadly Sins, and a trio of powerful cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX being named after Judeo-Christian archangels.
There's nothing meaningful about these naming choices, they're just references for the sake of references.
In fact, there's an entire TV Tropes article dedicated to examples of meaningless religious symbolism in various media, and most if not all of the examples in anime and manga are examples of Christian symbolism. I have no idea why this is the case, but I've reached the point where I don't really care whenever I notice anymore.
Basically, my point is that even though this story centers around biblical figures, there's nothing deep about it, there's no religious discussion or anything of that nature, it's just a zany comedy. But why don't I just show you what I mean? Welcome back to Red Right to Left. Now this manga is a little special because it marks a few firsts for Red Right to Left. First of all, this Bible has two creators, a writer and an artist.
It's fairly common to see this in manga where two people will split duties in creating a project. Let's Bible's creators are Yunin Wan and Yang Hyung-il. Now you might notice that these aren't Japanese names, and that's because both members of the duo are South Korean. Yoon and Yang have worked together on a number of projects, some of which have been published simultaneously as Korean-language manhwa and Japanese-language manga, including their most famous series, Blade of the Phantom Master.
So not only is this the first manga I've reviewed to be created by a team rather than one person, it's the first I've reviewed with non-Japanese creators.
Looking at the colorful two-page spread at the beginning of the story, we see that it was initially published in YG Magazine. I did a bit of digging and discovered that YG, or Y Generation, is a Chinese-language magazine distributed in Malaysia.
So a Korean duo, who also have works published in Japanese, made a story set in Croatia about a religion founded in Europe, then it was published in Chinese and distributed in Malaysia. I hope that cleared things up for everyone. Anyway, since this is a one-shot, I'm not going to give a brief overview this time. I'm going to be going through the whole story in detail, so be forewarned, there are major spoilers ahead. Let's begin.
We start with Vulcan doing absolutely nothing, I guess, before he's approached by an attractive, scantily clad blonde woman who asks Vulcan for directions. To heaven. Rather understandably, Vulcan thinks she's an idiot at first, but then he notices what she looks like and how she's dressed, and his second brain takes over.
Oh, I can see it now. He's going to do something that makes him out to be this huge pervert, like bump into her and grope her, or knock her over and they'll accidentally kiss, or...
He'll knock her over the head, kidnap her, lock her in a trunk, and plan to rape her so as to lose his virginity.
Am I a bad person if I find that funny?
So the place that Vulcan's taken the girl is actually his grandmother's fishing boat. Vulcan lives in a rural town where he works for his grandmother, and it's one of those big fish in a small pond cases. There's a short conversation between the two to establish that Vulcan is bursting with confidence while his grandmother thinks that he's all talk, before she hears the girl groaning from within the trunk.
Uh-oh, how's Vulcan gonna get out of this one?
By picking up an oar and hitting Grandma so hard she flies off of the boat into the distance.
Isn't this great?
In the first 6 pages of this one-shot, the hero of our story has kidnapped a girl with the intent of raping her and brutally subdued 2 defenseless women by attacking them from behind, one of them being his own grandmother.
This is so horrible and yet funny as hell.
Vulcan decks himself out in imitation designer clothes and attempts to, of all things, seduce the girl he has kidnapped. When the girl keeps going on about heaven, he gives up and just decides to make with the sexual molestation when he's distracted by the arrival of, mariachi wearing a witch's hat and parachute pants, floating across the water while dolphins leap around him. The mariachi strums his guitar and a car suddenly falls out of the air right onto the deck of the ship, and as he keeps playing, the same thing happens with all sorts of stuff. Vending machines, oil drums, an airplane, the Thinker sculpture. Wait, what? And Vulcan is forced to take the girl on an abandoned ship. When he shouts at the mariachi for sinking the boat and cock-blocking him, the mariachi introduces himself. I am an angel, original archangel Lucifer.
Oh jeez, it's Satan!
He's son, called Sancho.
Okay, no it's not. Wait, Satan had a kid? Dating must have been hard.
What do you mean you're breaking up with me? How can you do this? I told you I can't move out my dad's basement because I tried to usurp his power. It is not a dead-end job. I'd like to see you torment the souls of the damned for all eternity. Well, I'll see you in my place, bitch!
So Vulcan lashes out at Sancho, but Sancho uses his devil magic, or whatever you'd call it, to send Vulcan's oar flying back at him, and then briefly summons a pit of lions for him to fall into. The girl pulls Vulcan to safety and tells him it's all an illusion, and he thanks her by totally ignoring her advice and punching her in the head. Sancho ignores Vulcan's continued rant and addresses the girl. Exalted child, Nazareth. Wait.
Nazareth? As in Jesus? Jesus? The hot blonde girl, who looks like she walked outside wearing some dude's shirt after she slept with him. That's Jesus. The girl that Vulcan punched multiple times, kidnapped, tried to rape. That's Jesus. He tried to rape Jesus!
Okay, so the character's name is actually Iesus, and I'm not sure at all if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Sancho tries to convince Iesus that humans aren't worth sacrificing herself for, using Vulcan as an example, but she doesn't listen to him at all, so he says he's just going to kill her. Vulcan keeps trying to fight Sancho, but he's quickly knocked aside again. Iesus goes to help him, and oh wow! Dude, Vulcan, you might want to stop groping the Good Shepherd, the King of Israel, the Lion of Judah.
Not a concern for offending anybody, just if God turns out to be one of those overprotective father types, you're royally screwed.
Vulcan gets up and gets even more pissed off when he sees that an arrow that struck him was stopped by a locket that was strung around his neck, which was apparently the only genuine designer item he had. Vulcan blows into a conch, and rather than a bunch of marooned English boys appearing, it summons a bunch of giant turtles which Vulcan uses as stepping stones to reach Sancho. He raises his oar high to strike a critical blow and gets smacked by a wrecking ball. Huh. Who would have thought taking on Satan's descendant would be so difficult? So part 1 of 2 ends with a cutaway to a random goth-looking girl who is searching for Iesus and has crossed paths with Vulcan's grandmother.
Who seems not to have been greatly affected from being blasted off again.
Moving into part 2, things start with Vulcan and Iesus. Wait a minute, what's going on here? When did... okay, he was just knocked out and actually making out with the turtle.
Yeah, once you've had a character try to rape Jesus, pulling one of the oldest Just a Dream gags in the book really doesn't seem funny.
Vulcan realizes that Sancho has made off with Iesus and swears vengeance, presumably for the perpetuation of his sexual frustration. Meanwhile, Sancho is carrying Iesus in a cage towards what I assume is the gateway to hell or something like that, when he's attacked by the goth girl who turns out to be packing heat. Sancho identifies her as Simon, one of the 12 apostles.
Are we just gonna do the Last Supper with boobs now or something?
Actually, it's Simon's great-great-granddaughter, Honey. So another fight scene breaks out with more random objects falling from the sky and Honey shooting her guns. Then Honey takes out a coin and sticks it in a vending machine, presses a few buttons, and pulls an Uzi out?
I've heard of hacking Coke machines, but I didn't know you could do that!
Eventually, Honey frees Iesus when she hits Sancho with an RPG, and Vulcan catches her as she falls from the sky. While Honey is distracted, Sancho hits her with a Formula 1 car, knocking her out of the fight. As she lies helpless, Honey pleads with Vulcan for him to save Iesus' life, explaining her origin and that the world is doomed if she dies, etc. At one point she mentions that if Vulcan has sex with Iesus, he'll be sent to hell, so he promptly drops Iesus and starts carrying off Honey.
Can't really argue with his logic, though I think that this would have been more interesting if Honey hadn't been there as he weighed having sex versus the price of eternal damnation. I'm sure he would have struggled with the choice.
Sancho taunts Iesus again. He goes on about how humans are all selfish and they don't care about her unless they need to be saved, and then Vulcan hits him in the face! Yep, no explanation for when or why he changed his mind, but there you go. Vulcan asks Iesus why, if she's the child of God, she's not using her powers to get rid of Sancho, and she replies with some weird, indirect way of, I guess, saying she doesn't assume the right to use her powers that way. But barely 5 panels of dialogue go by before Sancho recovers and attacks, and holy crap!
It's Beelzebub!
Sancho rocks out and starts teleporting in entire buildings to crush everyone before just dropping a nuke. When the dust clears, Vulcan discovers that Iesus shielded he and Honey from the explosion with her own body.
Right, next time there's a nuclear explosion, I'll be sure to jump behind somebody. You know, if there's not a table to duck and cover under.
Honey starts crying because this is the way Iesus always acts, always putting humanity ahead of herself, like the time she carried her cross to her crucifix. Okay, you know what?
I know this is a comedy, it's not meant to be taken seriously, but this is the most pathetic portrayal of Jesus I think I've ever seen. I mean, she doesn't do anything. She's just a damsel in distress who spouts really cryptic moral speeches.
I mean, Jesus did more than just sit around for 35 years being holy before his crucifixion, right? He walked on water, he fed a large group of people with scraps, he healed the sick.
Meanwhile, all Jesus does is get kidnapped and go, "I'm so pure, please stop staring at my carefully exposed massive cleavage." Lady.
You're in a story with a sex-hungry fisherman who whacks people with an oar, a goth chick who pulls bazookas out of a vending machine, and a guitar-playing demon who summons nukes because he's just that fucking metal.
Why are you so boring, Jesus as a hot chick? Do something already!
Alright. So Vulcan is apparently affected by Iesus' sacrifice and vows to kill Sancho. As he rushes in, Iesus tells Honey that they need to trust in his abilities, so Honey pulls a soda out of the vending machine and tosses it to Vulcan. She explains that drinking it will give him the same power as Sancho, the ability to teleport anything that exists in the world to their location. So Vulcan chugs the Christ fuel and summons an ore made of pure diamond, hell yes! At first, Honey thinks that this is stupid, somehow not realizing the inherent awesomeness of the weapon/paddle, but then she realizes that there's no such thing as a pure diamond ore in the world. Vulcan didn't teleport the ore from somewhere else, he created it, which means he has greater power than just what the drink should be giving him. Sancho jumps into the air to dodge the ore, only to run into the other thing Vulcan conjured up, the happiest looking Kraken ever, which eats Sancho alive.
So I guess that means he'll be back in part 3, have to be rescued from a desert island, act like he's high the whole time, and ultimately the whole thing will feel rather disappointing.
So Christianity wins. Who could have seen that coming? Iesus and Honey thank Vulcan for saving them, and Iesus prepares to leave on the first bus to heaven. Literally. Just before she leaves, Iesus kisses Vulcan on the forehead and identifies him as a descendant of Peter, the first apostle. So Iesus departs for heaven while Honey decides to stay with Vulcan. She proposes that they go to the nearby city where they can find other descendants of the 12 apostles, but Vulcan has decided to stay in his hometown for the time being. The manga ends back on the bus with Iesus talking with her father, and I gotta say, for all the build-up, the face of God isn't all that big a deal. Iesus just says she had fun, and... wait a second, that's a short bus.
You made Jesus ride the short bus. I love this manga.
Iesus is really bland, like I said, but the rest of the characters are hilarious, and the extent to which the author goes for a cheap laugh is admirable. I have no idea how a character can be an attempted rapist, kidnapper, and woman abuser and still be likable, but somehow Vulcan pulls it off. Sancho is almost as entertaining with how bizarre and wacky he is most of the time, and yet when he actually does act villainous, he seems genuinely intimidating too. The artwork is pretty impressive just because of all the different things that get thrown around during the fight. Weapons, buildings, animals. The only downside to this is that sometimes there's just so much going on that it's difficult to follow everything that's happening. And sometimes the panel layout isn't too good either, like when Sancho dodges the diamond ore, it's shown in this tiny little panel, so the first time I read through it I wondered what the heck had happened to Vulcan's ore. The story is obviously simplistic, but the premise of Jesus as a hot chick being pursued by Satan's descendant who is a magical mariachi and needing to be saved by a sex-hungry Croatian fisherman is outlandish enough that the plot survives on the manic pace of the action.
So basically, if you can find blasphemy funny, you probably laugh your ass off reading this. Now, as it turns out, this one-shot was not the end of Let's Bible.
Yun and Yang later brought the title back as a serialized work which was published in Young Gagan in Japan. The series has a more serious tone than the one-shot, and instead of Vulcan as the protagonist, there's a Buddhist monk named Haomei. They were sort of going for an East meets West angle. I've only been able to find one chapter of it, which might be because the series lasted only 4 chapters total. I'm not sure if it was intended to end so quickly, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it might have been cancelled, since really, without the great amounts of humor of the one-shot, there's nothing really special about it.
And that's all I have to say about Let's Bible. From what I understand, Yun and Yang's other works don't aim for as humorous a note, but I'll be sure to check them out anyway. Well, I'm Wild Ruler of Time. Until we see each other again, forget what they taught you in school, always read right to left.